Hello everyone and welcome back to the OverSeers. My name's Proilios and I'm joined as usual by my co-host Nightwing, and we are 2 weeks into season 5 of the Overwatch League, and we've watched some really exciting games so far, although just from the NA region. We've finally gotten 60 FPS streams from the league, which is like a huge step in the right direction, I guess, because we were just tired of watching 30 FPS streams in week 1. But I'm just really hyped because the league has been quite fun to watch so far in Overwatch 2. And in just a few days, we'll be watching the APAC region playing as well. So, pretty exciting times.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's true because the game is a lot more watchable at this frame rate and you can actually tell what's happening. Um, Obviously, a lot of fun matches that have happened in this past week. Um, I particularly enjoyed seeing, uh, obviously, the Houston Outlaws kind of finding their own spot in their league. I think it was very confusing to see where they were sort of placed at with them 3-0ing the Dallas Fuel and then also then kind of playing a really close game with the Florida Mayhem this past week and losing to the Shock. So I think now we've got a little more data points on the board. I think it's easier to tell which teams are good, which teams are sort of middling, and which teams are bad. And I think while that does take out some of the uncertainty, I think it also just helps you understand the context of each game and makes interesting games all that more hyped up.
Yep. And let's just reflect a little bit on how week 2 went, and just talk about whom we think were the biggest winners from that week. And my pick personally has been the San Francisco Shock. I've just added them straight to the top of my power rankings for now. They've gone without losing a single match so far. They have played some pretty fantastic games against like teams of varying skill levels, but all throughout that they have been like really solid performers and have been probably the most consistent team in the NA region so far. Proper has just been popping off really hard. Finn has proven to be a really solid flex support, and the team seems to have set up a really great player rotation, just utilizing the players exactly where they need to be. I think hats off to Krusty and 9K for pulling this off once again, and let's just see how things continue for them throughout the season. But I think this was a really fantastic week for the Shock in general. And who would you say has had the best week 2 of the league, Nightwing?
I think for me, the best week two would have to be maybe the Toronto Defiant, honestly, because uh, we saw that they were still getting used to how their players played in that week one. They played a really good game, a close game against the Houston Outlaws in week one, and just barely sort of inched it out. But this week they come in and they just 3-0 the Paris Eternal. They're looking incredibly solid. The backline especially has been one of the biggest difference makers for the Toronto Defiant. And I think they're really starting to solidify themselves as a really good team. Players like Finale are able to establish themselves as genuinely good talent, which is really surprising to me because I didn't really expect much out of Finale, if I'm being honest, uh, let alone his Tracer performance, which I thought was quite exceptional, honestly, uh, for the player that he was hyped up to be, which was not a lot of hype, if I'm being honest. Uh, so yeah, I'm really happy to see the Toronto Defiance succeed. Under KDG's coaching and the bets that KDG's sort of put out here have really paid off for him, which I think uh, shows that he is actually a good coach, and it's not just him sort of being somewhat good at scouting existing talent because he has been able to make this team work quite well so far, and I think they should be solid contenders going forward into the season.
Yeah, no doubt the Toronto Defiant also had a pretty good week. And I think let's also talk about a couple of teams that we think didn't uh, have the best week too. And in my opinion, I think the Vancouver Titans took their biggest losses this week. The Titans are still winless this season. They have just been honestly shitting the bed. Uh, and I think a lot of that has been attributed to the lack of coaching they have received. And I believe there was some kind of article or expose of some sort uh, where somebody interviewed some players from the Titans or some staff. I don't quote me on this, but they just said that the head coach Flubby just kind of walks in, takes his paycheck, and leaves. And I don't know how authentic this is, but if that's the situation the Titans are in, it's honestly like quite miserable. Like, what a pity, right? Like, this once great organization, which used to have a team that was top two in the league back in season two, is now arguably the worst team in the Overwatch League just a few years later. And just an absolute shame what the organization has done. And the just the kind of I just feel that the organization is really demotivated at this point. So I don't really know what to say. Like, the Vancouver Titans are the biggest losers of this week, not just for their quality of gameplay for me, but just for the kind of the letdown the organization has turned out to be, at least in my opinion.
Okay, so uh, I have to regretfully inform you that the post that you saw was from a parody account called Ballsacky Sports,
Easy.
about Flubby collecting his paychecks and leaving. But yeah, I mean, I do agree that the Vancouver Titans, have definitely come a very long way down from their previous glory in the 2019 season. Uh, but at this point, you just have to sort of accept that this is what this team is going to be like. I think there's just basically the LA Valiant of the NA region at this point, and I think there are some sort of sparks of talent within players like Aspire. Uh, Falls hasn't been able to really show anything great, if I'm being honest, even though he was comparable to Collusion many ways, in the preseason. Uh, I think it just is not panning out very well for this team, and yeah, they definitely need to go back to the drawing board, but it's probably too late, honestly. Um, but yeah, I think for me, it would have to be a tie between the Boston Uprising and the Paris Eternal, but I think I'll go with the Boston Uprising here because I'm a bit more disappointed in them than I am with the Paris Eternal. Um, because the Boston Uprising have some genuinely great talent on their roster. The fact is that they're just sort of lost in the sauce on who to play, and the insanely large roster that they've got is really throwing them off balance, I feel. They've got a really good player in Striker who they keep subbing out for no reason. When Striker should honestly be in all the time. I mean, there's a reason why this man has, got championships under his belt. Uh, They've also, got to help Victoria with his nerves on the hit scan. I think Victoria has potential to be a good player, but it's not being realized well enough. I think they're keeping Valentine in way too often, and they're expecting him to make carry plays when Valentine is not really a carry player all of the time. Even if he does play those heroes that require, the sort of feast and famine play styles at times. And the tank line is a complete mess as well. They have three tanks and they can't figure out who to play. Marvel did look solid enough with the Doomfist in week one, but then you could see that the Doomfist comp has been slowly getting figured out over time, and the Boston Uprising are not really making that work very well. Uh, to the point where in week one they almost lost to the Vancouver Titans, and Itzal as well as Punk are not really able to find their spot either. At one point, Punk started playing Diva, which is probably the worst tank almost in this meta, outside of maybe Orisa, which has not been played at all. So I think the Boston Uprising are just completely lost at this point, and they need to find one roster that works for them, and maybe just figure out one DP substitution they can make and keep the rest of the sort of lineup that they have like one single solid piece. Because right now they're trying to make too many substitutions and it's just not working out very well for them, which is very clearly visible in their sort of standings right now.
Yeah, I think the coaching staff needs to really take a long, hard look at w- their fielding strategy because I think the tank is arguably the most important player in terms of communication because your tank is the one who's supposed to kind of lead the team, dictate where to position and where to take fights. And if you're going to have a different calling structure every single time that you're playing a new map just because if you're switching out a tank, that's going to be highly inconvenient for your team because your players are going to have to learn how to adapt to the different maps and to the different players, rather the different tanks that are going to be playing alongside them. So yeah, it's just a bit of a mess right now because I think the Boston Uprising are still a pretty good team, but they've just been inconsistent because of all of these minor issues that are just adding up against them. So yeah, we'll just have to see if they improve in any way in week three. But yeah, I think they were pretty big losers in week two as well. And all right, I think let's just talk about some of the roster moves that happened in the past few days. And let's start off by talking about the Vancouver Titans signing yet another flex DPS player in Mirror. Now, remember that they've already got Psycho on the team, who played a few maps for them earlier in week one, I guess. And then later on, they just started putting in Shockwave more and more. And then they signed Mirror, and then Mirror was just in all the time. But honestly, I think it's a bit of a waste of money, not because I think Mirror is a bad player. I think he's pretty decent, but they're not going to win anything at all. And I honestly still don't think that the Vancouver Titans are really motivated. They're probably just here to sell the merch, in my opinion. Because I think like look at how easily I fell for the article, right? Which said that Flubby was just not doing anything and just coming in to take his money. Like that just speaks volumes because for the past 2 years this organization has done absolutely nothing to improve their coaching, and now they're just throwing money to sign a flex DPS which just has more experience, I guess. I mean, good for them because Miro will still provide them with a good bit of flexibility and a bit more veteran experience. But yeah, I don't know. He was in for the team like pretty much all the time since he was signed, but he didn't really have a massive impact, which is, I think, like something to be expected because he has just been added to this roster. But yeah, I'm not expecting great things. I don't think this signing is going to really pivot the team in any sort of new direction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I saw Mirror play, it was pretty embarrassing, honestly. I didn't think he was in sync with the team at all. Seemed like a very last minute signing for no real reason. Uh, the fact of the matter is that Mirror has been a stopgap solution for the Gladiators at best in the past and hasn't really shown great potential as a player outside of that. Just because he's flexible doesn't mean he can actually do very well on the role that he's placed in. Uh, Alongside the fact that, you know, even if DPS coaching was considered iffy by some people, it was still leagues better than whatever is being provided to the Vancouver Titans. So I think Mirror will find it hard to flourish whatsoever in this new team environment. And I think they should probably just stick to Aspire and Shockwave. Those players can cover most of their sort of bases and sort of just go from there, honestly, because I think uh, that lineup has been the most competitive and powerful roster that they've been able to put together from the different iterations that we've seen for the Vancouver Titans. And I don't really see Mirror being very helpful in terms of handling any particular comps outside if you want to use him as that same stopgap solution to put him on other roles. But I'm still not a fan of that. Maybe you could try and put him on the tank Doomfist, similar to what Dante has done, but I'm not sure the Vancouver Titans coaching staff can really figure that out. I think they should find a play style that works for them and then just try to play that play style because that's what seems to be working for these lower seeded teams. Look at the London Spitfire, right? The success that they've got from just one tricking that rush comp, and that's what the Vancouver Titans need to do instead of trying to figure out the meta and play everything that the enemy team is playing. I think they need to find their own play style and figure out their comms, figure out a particular roster rotation for them, and just stick to that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's going to be an uphill battle for the Titans either way. So just good luck to them, I guess, and I hope Mirror sees some success on this roster because honestly, it's just not like a great career move. But I think if no one else was going to sign Mirror, I think that was probably his best move to stay at the topmost tier of Overwatch. So yeah. All right, let's talk about the second signing that happened this week, and that was the signing of Faraway 1987 by the Guangzhou Charge. And this is a pretty huge signing, right? Because Faraway was an absolutely top tier flex support with the Chengdu Hunters last year. Saw a decent bit of playtime, played the Ana, played the Zen, and overall, he's just been really impressive for the past couple of years. So, what do you think of this signing, Nightwing? Do you think it's going to affect the Charge in any major sort of way?
Yeah, I mean, I think Faraway has always had potential. It's just that uh, due to having to share playtime with Monk last year, he couldn't really show that off very well. Uh, and I think that's something that might change here if the Guangzhou Charge is able to field him in instead of Molly. Because I do genuinely think that Faraway is an upgrade over Molly. Uh, Despite Molly looking decently good in the 2020 season with the Chengdu Hunters, if I remember correctly, um, I think that the Charge will still struggle, but this should help them somewhat at least. You can see that the Toronto Defiant, for example, has also been sort of getting success due to their very strong backline, even if their DPS players are still slight unknowns with players like Finale, even though he has been, doing really well. So I think a strong backline is always well appreciated, and Faraway should be able to still make a name for himself individually, similar to what Bong has done in the past. Even if the team does find itself close to the bottom of the APAC region, which is likely just because of how strong many of these other teams are. Um, so because of that, I think Faraway might still struggle to really stand out, just because his team might struggle. But on an individual level, uh, he should be able to make some good plays here and there, especially in Overwatch 2, which is a lot more, mechanically oriented. And Faraway is a complete nut on those, mechanical flight supports. So I think, yeah, good signing, good upgrade for the Guangzhou Charge. But I think this team is still going to struggle.
Yep, I think despite all of the issues that the team has inherently, because I think we both were pretty much in agreement that the Charge are one of the weakest teams in the APAC region this year. I think having Fave in there will at least help them get a few more wins. It's definitely the right direction to take the team in my opinion, because as Extra mentioned in an interview recently, I'm gonna try and remember to post that translated interview in the video description. But Extra did mention that they wanted the power to play double flex support and just have a backup option in there, and they just got into pretty quick negotiations with Faraway and mutually decided that this was a good idea. So I think I have a lot of faith in Faraway as well as uh, like the Guangzhou Charge. Like it's a good eye for talent for sure. So I think although this team is not going to be elevated to like a consistent playoffs roster, they will certainly be able to get some surprise wins here and there, maybe beat some mid-table teams. So yeah, it's a good move. And let's talk about one more major change that happened in the NA region, which is that the Paris Eternal dropped Naga and signed Wub instead, uh, seemingly because of budget constraints. And I was pretty surprised by this announcement uh, because Naga was a pretty good player and one of the better players on the Paris Eternal roster. And them just removing him and signing Wub, which I think is because Wub is a hyperflex and just can cover a lot more, like not a lot more, but a few more heroes than Naga can, especially on the hit scan. It's like a deal gone dirty. I think in I don't know. Naga seems pretty okay with it, honestly. Like, I remember Bob posting on Twitter that he will do better in the next game because Paris lost the first game they played with him, and then Naga just kind of consoled him by replying to the tweet saying that it's fine, you were put in a tough situation and you did your best. So I don't know. It seems to be like a fairly amicable separation between Naga and the Eternal, but I must say Wub does have the stuff. Like he has naturally seen a decent bit of success in contenders, and although I don't think he's going to be really mind blowing in the league, I think he can pull off some plays here and there, as he did show on the Genji through his really good mechanics. So I think it's an interesting signing. I don't necessarily think it's the right one, but we'll just have to wait and watch, I guess.
Yeah, I think. I mean, Wub is a good addition, but is he really an upgrade over Naga, despite him being, quote unquote hyperflex? I'm not so sure, honestly, because Naga did seem fairly solid last year, and they've just dropped him out of nowhere one week into the league, which I think, first of all, is a real shame, based on like how the contracts are structured in the league, because I don't think that's something that should be happening. With the Chengdu situation as well, alongside uh, now this very weird Paris situation alongside it, which I'm just not a very big fan of. I think this is still a professional player's job, and it should be better respected than that, instead of kicking players left and right. But that aside, I think from a competitive standpoint, I think Wob looked all right. Uh, I think I don't really buy into the hype just yet. I think he's going to have to prove himself to me, for me to buy into the Wob hype. I think uh, he did look solid in tier two, but that doesn't always translate very well into the Overwatch League. I mean, Aspire looked great as well, but uh, it's not like that was like a perfect one-to-one transition into the Overwatch League either, where he's still, in probably the worst team in the league so far. So in that sense, I think Bob is just going to have to work alongside the team to actually get some wins here and there, while they can, because the Battle Tunnel is really struggling quite hard right now. They've pretty much got the same like win loss and almost the same map record as the Vancouver Titans, just one fewer match. And I think while he might look good here and there on the Genji, I think it's just not enough for me to have a lot of confidence in this team yet. I think Blister is still struggling to integrate with the rest of the team. I don't think he's working out too well. Uh, I don't particularly think that the Pastel has anything nailed down quite well enough yet. So unless they can really start to show me that this addition does actually help them, and that coaching staff does actually pull themselves up by the socks and uh, try to get more wins under their belt, I'm not really sure what to think of this signing.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. And I think let's just move on to our predictions for week three. It's going to be an exciting week because we are also going to get to see nine APAC games spread across 3 days. So it's going to be pretty exciting. And uh, w- there are four main matches we want to talk about across these 3 days. Starting off with the Guangzhou Charge versus the LA Valiant matchup, which is going to be happening on day one in APAC. And what's your prediction for this match, Nightwing? How do you think it will go, and which players do you think we need to keep an eye out for just to see what kind of affects this matchup in major ways?
So I think this should be possibly winnable for the LA Valiant more than the Guangzhou Charge. But that's assuming that they get their entire school of DPS players in line. Honestly, they should probably just start off by fielding players like Dia and Innovation in my eyes. I think the other players are decent bets, but they're not really something you would want to rely on straight off the bat, unless they're doing exceptionally better than Dia and Innovation, in scrims and in the tryouts that they had. Uh, I'm really going to be questioning and looking very closely at how Sashin plays, because the Valiant do be seem to saying the Valiant do seem to be saying that Sashin does cover all the tank heroes required. but I'm not sure how that will actually be in actual practice. No Hill obviously does have some idea of what he's doing, but it just needs to be like seen in action, I feel, because the roster is kind of tilted towards that DPS side, and there's not a lot of backups on the other roles, especially tank. So I'm going to be looking very closely at the Valiant, but I think in terms of pure talent, in the most optimal roster that they can put together, they should be able to win this. For the charge, I think you'll probably be looking at Eileen, Prong, and Faraway to make the largest hero plays. I think the other players are okay, except Rio, who I'm not a big fan of. Uh, but this team is still sort of figuring itself out, I feel, especially with that very last minute signing. Uh, and I think if they play Molly instead, I think that'll honestly be a big boon to the Valiant because uh, I think Faraway has to be in if this team needs to win. So with that, I think it's going to be a really interesting match. I think it's going to be the equivalent of a toilet bowl in the APAC region, even if some of these players are legitimately good.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Valiant have the edge as well. I think they are finally going to break their long chain of losses because they haven't won a game since season 3, right? So I think the main edge that they have over the Guangzhou Charge is that they just have a lot more firepower. They have a lot more explosive players. And even though like a lot of that firepower lies with the DPS line, I think that's enough at least to like kick things off in the APAC region. Because even though yes, there have been scrims happening, I think the teams really show their true colors only on stage, and that's when we are going to really find out how explosive all of these players are. And I just don't have a lot of faith in the Chargers DPS line to be able to match talents like Dia, Innovation, and Easy Han. So that's going to be really interesting to see. And I do have a lot of faith in Noel as a coach. I think if he has made the move to sign Sachin, I think there must be some kind of solid reason behind that. I don't have faith. I don't have a lot of faith in Sachin, just because of how underwhelming he has been in the league when he was with the with the Hangzhou Spark. But I just have a lot of faith in Noel simply because of how much success he had with Team CC and working with this elite trio of DPS players that they have. I think the backline is also like it's stable, right? It's probably one of the weaker backlines, but I think that's probably going to be enough considering that supports are not really the playmakers in this current meta. So that's fine. But yeah, I think if you just talk about the support matchup, the Guangzhou Charge win out simply because they have Farway. But other than that, the Valiant have an edge in this matchup. I think it's probably going to be a 3-2 towards the Valiant. And yeah, any further thoughts on this matchup, Nightwing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really interested in the tank matchup. I hope I hope that I don't see Rio in, and I hope Sashin does better than I expect because otherwise it's just going to be like two apes. Have you seen the meme with the two apes from The Simpsons fighting and then everyone else is standing around a circle?
Yeah.
It's going to feel a little bit like that. Uh, if the tank lines don't actually play well enough. And I mean, this is really just a fight for who's the absolute worst team in the APAC region. So it is going to be entertaining, I hope, just not super cursed. Uh, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty much my thoughts.
Sure. So the second game that we wanted to talk about was uh, is also on day one in the APAC region, which is the Hangzhou Spark versus the Seoul Dynasty, and I think this is going to be a huge game in setting the tone for APAC Overwatch in general. And the reason I say this is because the Spark and the Dynasty are two teams that we really haven't been able to place accurately in our minds. Like it's a bit of a will they won't they situation with a lot of their players, so that will they really be able to live up to our expectations, or will they just kind of shit the bed? So they've had a lot of like ups and downs across the past couple of years playing in the APAC region. They have beaten each other a fair number of times. So it's going to be like Nightwing mentioned, that Charge versus Valiant will kind of tell us which the worst team in the APAC region is. I think Spark versus Dynasty will tell us which the most middling team in the APAC region is. So I'm really excited to see it. I think that the Hangzhou Spark have a slight advantage in this matchup. I am in general a, a pretty huge fan of their DPS line, especially with Shy and Alpha Yi and they've wait. I keep on saying Super Rich for the DPS player, but that's not it. I keep forgetting the name. But in general, they've got a really flexible DPS line. They've also got Gushua, Banar, and Liga on tank. I feel like they will not have a lot of rotating tank players. Uh, it's just a general idea. I think the team has put a lot of faith in Gosho in the past, so he'll probably be starting, especially because Winston has been meta for a while. And this also makes me really excited to see Smurf, right? Because Smurf is also one of the best Winston players that we have seen in the league in recent times. So Spark versus Dynasty, a battle of two elite tier Winstons, is going to be really amazing to watch. And that's the main reason I think it's going to be really close. But there's also just the spectacle of seeing Profit and Fitz going up against two really solid rookie DPS players in Alpha E and Pineapple. There we go, Pineapple. And as well as Shy, who was like a rookie of the year contender last year. So, pretty exciting times. And yeah, we'll see what happens. It could honestly go either way, in my opinion.
I think for me, the difference maker and why I'm going for the Dynasty in a 3-2 instead of the Spark is because I think Yushua has sort of been washed out a little bit. The past few years, I think Smurf is just a better Winston, and Winston seems to be the most reliable comp, unless you're like really, really solid with the Zarya comps or the Doomfist comps. But both those comps are starting to get figured out. Um, and I think if you're just going to go for that safe bet with the Winston comp, uh, I think the fact that Smurf is on the Soul Dynasty just makes it that much more obvious that like the Soul Dynasty have an upper hand. Uh, I think the fact that the Soul Dynasty are keeping a smaller core, similar to the Shock, who's currently dominating NA, also is a good sign because I think currently in Overwatch 2 you probably want a more closer knit roster, from what I can tell. Uh, Teams that are going for these extremely large rosters and have multiple tanks, especially that disrupt the flow, like the shot calling flow of the game, they're just getting lost in the sauce. Looking at you, Boston Uprising. Um, I think that's where the Hangzhou Spark might just struggle, especially considering that they've had Starfish in the past. They've got Pangoon now, but the assistant coaches are sort of middling at best. And I think because of that, the decision making of this team, the players that they choose to field, might just be pretty messed up, honestly. And that's where I think the Soul Dynasty have a upper hand. They've got a hyperflex in Profit that you probably keep in at all times. They've got a great hit scan player in Fitz. And then you can put in Stalker sometimes, though I would really prefer that. So in that sense, I think Soul Dynasty just have a more clear-cut win condition. They're not really struggling with player substitutions, and I think that might give them an advantage. That said, you're definitely right that this does give you like a pretty good picture of which team comes second to the Shanghai Dragons probably, and which team is sort of more middling, which team competes with the Phillies, the Guangzhous, the Valiants of the world. And I think this match is going to be a real teller for that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Those are some really good points. So let's just move on and talk about the game on day two, which is in the NE region between the San Francisco Shock and the LA Gladiators. And I think a lot of people are going to just swear at me in the comment section for this, but I feel like the San Francisco Shock are going to roll the Gladiators with a 3-0 win. And I feel like a major factor in this is just that the Shock have been far more consistent than the Gladiators, and I think uh, that's a big deal, especially early on in the season, because I think these early wins or losses can really set the tone for your team's mentality and just kind of determine the general attitude of all the players going into further games. I think the Shock are they have hit really high highs already. I think proper, especially popping off on that Tracer, sometimes on the Genji. It's been a delight to watch just because of how consistent he's been and how formidable he's been. I think Koluj has also been a nice stable presence. The team doesn't have to worry about tank rotations with him being the solo tank. They're not messing around with any off-role players filling in for him or anything like that, which is great. And I think Finn and Violet have formed a really solid backline as well. So with the like general team being really cohesive, uh, I think it's a pretty big advantage going into this game. I do think the Gladiators can probably take one map off of the Shock just because they do have some playmakers as well. Especially you've got Kevster, you've got Ans who's being played more and more as we saw in the past week on the hit scan, and his aim is just incredible. Shu has been probably the best flex support this season so far. So I think it's going to be a very fun matchup. It's probably going to be the most entertaining matchup in the NA region for this week, and yeah, it's definitely worth keeping an eye out for.
Yeah, I mean, I think this match is going to be the highest tier of Overwatch that we're going to see so far in the league, honestly. Um, because the Gladiators are on the up and up. They haven't really, actually lost up, apart from the Dallas Fuel so far. Um, and the Shock obviously haven't lost at all. They've only dropped one map to the NYXL and then uh, I think another map to some other team. Uh, but that said, I think the Gladiators definitely have the potential, I feel, to take maps from the Shock, just because you could see that the Shock were kind of lost in that match against the NYXL on Kings Row, where I think they didn't really have an answer to Kellen's Zarya. Uh, I know you can say they're sandbagging, they're sort of messing around, but the fact of the matter is that they're paid to win, and they did not in that situation. And I think that's where you could see the Gladiators actually come in, maybe play that similar Zarya style, or they could even go for a rush similar to what London played. And I think that might be somewhere where you could see the Shock struggle, because I feel like they've only really seen success with Colluge on the Winston so far. And Colluge did seem kind of the weakest factor, the weakest link in the chain almost in that map on Kings Row. That said, the Shock are looking incredibly strong, so I would be a fool if I didn't give them this uh, victory as a prediction. That said, I think the Gladiators have some upset potential, uh, though I'd probably place them at a 3-1. They do have the potential to actually beat the Shock honestly, if the Shock actually messes up, because I feel like Shock has still not been tested. They got some easy wins against some incredibly poor teams in week one, and in week two they were able to also get the NYXL as an easy opponent, and then the Houston Outlaws uh, played that same Doom comp over and over again, and that got figured out because Finn played an excellent Ana, hitting every sleep, and that comp is being figured out by many teams now. So I think the Gladiators will be probably the best test for the Shock so far. Uh, and if they're able to clear this, I think Shock are clearly like the best team by far in the NA region. Though I think that they will start to sort of show some cracks in their armor in this upcoming match. But anyway, I think this is the match I'm looking forward to the most out of all the matches, just because it's going to be the highest tier of Overwatch, probably being played this week. So yeah, probably keep your eyes peeled for this match.
Glad we're on the same page about that. And let's move on to the final game that we want to talk about for week 3, and that is the matchup between the Chengdu Hunters and the Seoul Dynasty, which is on day 3 in the APAC region. And a lot of people are wondering how good the Chengdu Hunters are going to be now that they have let go of a few of their players, some of them being Aprita, then Farway 1987, and Yveltal, and they've just signed an off-tank player in Daisy. So this is going to be a very, like, I don't know, a very difficult set of predictions for anyone that's going to be predicting the APAC region, at least until the Hunters' first game, which is on day 2. But what are your general thoughts about this matchup, Nightwing? Are you still high on the Hunters, or do you think that they'll fall to the Seoul Dynasty?
Um, to be honest, I think the Seoul Dynasty has got this because I think even if you compare everyone else head to head, I think the Chengdu Hunters have a slight advantage probably with Monk over Creative, but the Seoul Dynasty have an advantage with probably Fitz over Jinmu, just because I have very little confidence in Jinmu, if I'm being honest. I think Profit and Fitz are, Profit and Leave are comparable in terms of their, carry potential. Even if they might be playing different heroes, you might see Profit play that Genji. Um, that said, I think it's likely that Jinmu might be the weakest link in the chain here, and that's why I'm so sad about trying to releasing Aprita, because I feel like that would have been an insanely good DPS line. But with Jinmu and instead of Aprita, I'm not so sure anymore because he does sort of just start playing those silly heroes at times, and the compositions fall apart. I feel, people have claimed that Jinmu is coachable or whatever, but the proof is in the pudding, and he's just not been able to sort of actually produce a lot of great results that I'm happy with. I think often he has been sort of the weakest link and sort of the letdown factor for this team. And the reason that they've had to play such strange comps that are not meta. And especially in the new game that has balance skewed to one side, I think the Chengdu Hunters might find it hard to adapt to that. I also think they're going to struggle integrating Daisy, especially after the sort of interview comments that they've put out, saying that they require Daisy's flexibility. That clearly means that they're not going to be able to, integrate Gaga very well, especially since Wrecking Ball is basically useless at the current meta. So I think there are a lot more challenges for the Chengdu Hunters, especially in this current meta where Winston seems to be quite powerful compared to the Soul Dynasty. So that's why I would go with the Soul Dynasty, but with a 3-2, because I think there is some upset potential if the Chengdu Hunters find another one of their, meta-defining comps or meta-breaking comps to sort of counter the Soul Dynasty's offerings.
Mm-hmm. Look, I think a lot of your points are really valid. I wouldn't put any of them aside. I've tentatively put this as a 3-0 win for the Chengdu Hunters. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen because I'm just keen on seeing how the Hunters play against the Charge on day 2 first. But I do think that this team is still quite competent, even though uh, they've lost a few players. Like, I don't think Aprita being let go is like a valid reason to suddenly be really low on this team, as a lot of people have been on social media. Like, let's not forget that they still have uh, the season 4 MVP Leave on this roster, and uh, I think Leave is just someone who can be one of those like highest level mechanical carries in Overwatch 2, just because like he was an MVP mainly because of his mechanics, right? He wasn't an MVP because of his teamwork or just like because his teammates liked him. It's not like a Dennis Awelka award. This guy can aim. He can aim on every kind of hero. He understands how to engage, how to disengage, like where to position. He's one of the best players in the Overwatch League at this point. And I think that like you can't really oversell it, right? He's just amazing, and he's teamed up with Jinmu, whom I had also mentioned I wasn't really high on because Jinmu is not very flexible. Like he'll play the team heroes that his coaches ask him to play, but he has a very niche comfort zone. But right now in this current Overwatch 2 meta, which allows for a lot of Genji play, which falls into one of like which falls comfortably into Jinmu's comfort hero pool. I think this is a pretty big advantage for the Chengdu Hunters because I think at times Jinmu can look like the best Genji or the best Pharah in the world. Uh, so I think him going up against either Prophet or Stalker on the Genji, mostly Prophet, is going to be a very fun matchup to watch because Prophet's naturally amazing as well on the hero. So it's going to be really competitive there. I do believe that Leave is a better DPS player than Fitz, although Fitz is no slouch. Even though this is a Winston meta, I wouldn't really be concerned for Gaga because Gaga is a really good Winston player as well. Like even though he's known for his wrecking ball, which is definitely arguably his best main tank hero, Winston is right up his alley as well. So I'm not worried about him going up against Smurf. And he's also got the backup of Monk and Nisha. And like just these five players were all part of Chengdu's core last year as well. So they all know each other, have played with each other, have found a lot of success with each other, and know how to communicate. And again, there's no language barrier once again, so one less thing to worry about. And they're going up against the Dynasty who have got Smurf and Vindime as two of their newest players. Now, with Smurf, I'm not that worried, naturally, just because of how good he is. Vindime is a bit of a rookie, and I think that could be a bit of an issue, at least early on in the season, when he's still trying to find his footing on the team and kind of be that communicative main support. So, I honestly think that the Hunters have a lot of advantages against the Dynasty going into this matchup. My only worry could be that Nisha would have to play a bit more Lucio, just because Nisha is more so like a Mercy and Brig player. But other than that, I'm pretty confident that the Hunters have got this. So it may or may not be a 3-0, but I do think that the Soul Dynasty will lose this matchup. Any additional thoughts here, Nightwing?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be probably interesting to see how the Chengdu Hunters have coped with, that change in their lineup, especially because obviously they would have, a completely different way of scrimming before the different changes that they had to make to the lineup. So I'm interested to see if they can, still continue forward properly, even with those changes. And I think there's a good bit of fumble potential from the Chengdu Hunters, especially because they have, historically been sort of a bit offbeat compared to other teams. But I think there's also this very good chance that they find a comp that works for them and they're able to beat the Soul Dynasty. Uh, I don't think I agree with 3-0 just because I think Soul Dynasty does have some genuinely really good talent. Uh, and so they should be able to at least tag a map, if not more. But yeah, I personally think they could probably beat the Chengdu Hunters because of the situation that the Chengdu Hunters are in. But I think this is another really good match just to figure out, who begins to contend with teams like the Shanghai Dragons, who are expected to dominate the APAC region and maybe even the entire league. So I think these are definitely the upper echelon of teams that we're getting into with this sort of match as well. And if you want to figure out APAC, I think this is one of the best matches to look at.
Yeah, I agree there for sure. And I think that's all the stuff that we had planned to discuss for this episode. So, unless you have any additional thoughts, Nightwing, I think we can end things here.
No, I think that's pretty much all there is for me to say. Uh, if you guys have a look at the Kickoff Clash Reaper skin, that's a pretty funny skin. Maybe watch the league and snag that. But because I definitely will be, it's a really interesting skin. I want to see like a half naked Reaper just go around shooting people left and right. Connect those drops. #ad. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me.
All right, then. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. We really appreciate it. Do let us know in the comments which teams you're high on and which teams you're low on going into this week. Do let us know and share our videos so that we can attract more Overwatch League fans and have more productive discussions. And we will see you next week and just recap week 3 for you all. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you then.